hello to all the friends on the call. And I just wanted to start by thanking Matthew and Bill Dugan for engaging volunteer marketing. This is the first time for On the Offense where we've had marketing support, and I mean the social media stuff you guys did was just fantastic. Thank you, along with everything else you did. So a huge appreciation there. So this On the Offense, as all of you know, is renewed sort of strategy slot. We have marketing events and other special programming. We've got the annual now conference coming up September 12th through 14th. So Renewed's doing more and more programming. So please, everyone on the call, keep active in that. But today, I think today's a particularly important topic. It was sort of named it the future of communities, because I think a lot of us are experiencing strategic adjustment, maybe coming out of COVID, but I think coming out of many other factors too, where the model of connecting with our customers is evolving. And a lot of the people who are on this call today, I know, go back to the days where the connection was direct mail. We've transformed through so many models, enterprise licensing being one of the later ones, but many of those have transactional nature, and it's hard. And communities movement is a little bit different on that. So I think most of you on the call know both Ashley Friedlein, who's the CEO or the director of Guild, generous enough to give us our new platform as we try to migrate away from Salesforce before they bankrupt us. Slate is our current platform is a Salesforce subsidiary, so you can expect some problems there. Ashley also was your first company was eConsultancy, which a great entrepreneurial effort there. So somebody who's lived the community world for a long time. Same thing with Victoria Mellor, which in the early days of the community movement was probably the dominant force, I would say. And now, with Kademy. So we've got two people who have from the entrepreneurial point of view, made their living and bet their financial future on the community movement. So Ashley, thank you for contributing Guild to Renewed. And Ashley and Victoria, thank you for being here today. So the format, as you know, is we'll go through about 20 minutes of just sort of interview and then open it up for discussion so everybody can participate. I think that's the power of this community. But what has fundamentally changed, and I maybe just start with Victoria on this one. When you talk about the move to communities, what makes them essential now and what has changed? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think of community as a sort of fundamental part of how you engage customers, right? So I think, I've always been somebody who is naturally just engaged with people, and I'm curious about what customers wanted, and I think that grew with our company. So for me, it was always part of how we did things. But I think engagement now is, because we can so much more, because we can easily engage with people. It's part of, how we need to operate. But I think, so I think of it as, you're obviously offering a value proposition to people, whether that's through a subscription or a membership. And I think, the idea of engaging them through community, is a game changer often, because I feel the sort of social capital that people get through involvement in a community is actually a very serious business driver for us. And, I've always found that, you can add so much more value to a value, your classic B2B value prop through community. So I don't think a lot has changed, but I think during the pandemic, there has definitely been much more appetite for connection, because especially my customers have had more challenges. They want that kind of that peer-to-peer group to just to sense check what they're doing. So we've seen a lot more need for connection and community.
Yeah. Ashley, as the business model, you've written a lot about this and spoken quite a bit about it, but I think, the communities, I think, move all companies one step closer to being tech and software companies, because the technology is an important part of it. I know you've talked about changing the transactional sale model and even sort of, migrating away from annual and monthly subscriptions, because of the number of touch points. But in your mind, what's fundamentally changed? Are some of those the high points, or are there other things that come to mind?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think with communities, it is a bit back to the future, as in the dot-com days, we had the 3 Cs, and then late 90s, which is content, commerce, and community. So it's not new. And of course, the internet post its military incarnation was communities of academics, and we're tribal species. So community certainly isn't new, but it has, I think, it's sort of coming back into fashion, as it were, partly because of the pandemic, obviously, and the need to connect digitally and just the desire for connection. But I think there's quite a few other broader trends as well, which play into that. Some of that's just the whole digital transformations when you're talking about digital community and remote working and the gig economy and passion economy and all these sorts of economic trends. They are about people working at a distance, often remotely and increasingly internationally, but they need a way, therefore, to kind of connect and stay in touch. And so communities, I think, plays into that. But also this thing, even things like trust, the nature of trust, over time, we've seen in marketing. So eConsultancy, my first business, where we look at marketing trends. And there's lots of studies from people like Edelman and things which showing that trust is been ebbing away from institutions and indeed brands towards friends and peers. So in the professional B2B world, that would be your peers. So when you're looking for trusted information and advice, often now you want to access a community to get their take. So I think that's also something that's kind of playing out. I think also the other channels, content marketing, social media, email, there's quite a lot of saturation and noise there. So community is a way, I think, to create cut through and genuine emotional engagement and attachment. That's just the rest of a lot of our digital marketing channels have got very kind of noisy. I think, as you say as well, it's about this move towards recurring revenue, which obviously renewed as part of the core to the ethos, but not just in media and publishing, but obviously in software, SaaS, that SaaS model. And I wrote an article, I think, why every business should be a SaaS business, or at least think that way. If we're talking about recurring or renewing relationships as well as transactions, then clearly community is a vehicle for maintaining that kind of connection. And I think also just the other big trend in marketing or business generally is what gets called maybe customer centricity, which sometimes is a bit of a buzzword and things, but being close to the customer, understanding their needs, actually acting upon those, caring about them, investing in customer success, all these things are fit again well with being close to your customers, and so community plays to that as well. So I think there's a lot of reasons really.
I think to some degree, the renewed members whose careers have depended on close contact with their customers, maybe we might likely to be complacent given the things you just mentioned, Ashley, because we take it for granted that we're good at it, but there's so much more competition now coming from so many different places that I think the challenge for all of us is to listen seriously to what you're saying and make sure we're staying ahead of the curve and not losing market share to other providers who can suddenly come in. I also am very sensitive to the change in tempo of touch points required have that kind of relationship. Could I add, both of you commented on things that I think most directly affect the sales model. So I maybe go in that direction just a little bit. As we migrate to including the technology and the interaction of customer communities into our business models, either of you care to chime in on what happens to the traditional sales model? What do we have to do to change what's going on there? Victoria, Ashley, either.
Yeah, I mean, I can just share a thought there. I think I'm a firm believer that the community needs to fit your own business model. So, I think both my businesses are in a high ticket enterprise model. And so how I define community is very different from, some of the communities, like, the renewed community, for example, which, but it's still community. And I think, the way we ran community and the way we sold through that, peer, this peer network, this share cost peer network, if you think, is to kind of give the, one of the value props is that you will get access to this incredible community of people like you, which, Ashley said, this trust in seeing peers, people like me is an incredibly important part of selling a high value ticket item. So, it's got to have the right people in the community, right? It's got to be curated. It's got to be people like me. So I think, one of the points I would make is that you need to create the community that's right for your business model. If we had put a platform there and said to our customers, go and chat on a community, that wouldn't have worked. I mean, I knew that we had to do something that fitted the model that we were following, right? So I think in terms of selling the idea of a curated community is actually incredibly important, and actually giving them a sense of the community that they're going to be joining is how we sell. So often we put prospects who are in a sales cycle on one of our community programs, for example, and they will, they see the peers around them, and that's how they get that validation, right? So it's actually part of our sales process.
Yeah, I think you're talking about a different kind of emotional connection. I think, Ashley, you used the term left brain, right brain about the engagement elements, and I do think that it definitely moves you away from a closing the sale kind of mentality in Salesforce, let's say, to a much longer game, and may require different types of sales resources internally, the kind of people who can engage more at a peer-to-peer level to be part of these communities. But so sales is one place it's impact, but Ashley, the other place I think you referred to earlier, and I know you've thought a lot about is communities are more than a bolt-on if we're rediscovering them. I think events come to mind first, but I know you feel that communities are more than a bolt-on. They're kind of at the center. Could you maybe talk about that a little bit in the sales and product development, in any all the parts of the information industry that we all care about?
Yeah, I mean I think on the sales bit and indeed marketing, it depends. If you're selling like quite a high-end enterprise kind of priced product or proposition, then that's quite a high touch sort of experience still, and I think needs quite sophisticated salespeople who are more about solution selling, really. So understanding the problem and the need, and often creating more custom solutions and doing custom onboarding and personalization, and so that's kind of one end of the spectrum. But down the other end, if you've got the kind of lower priced or mid-priced sort of products and solutions, it's harder. You can't necessarily afford to be doing that very sort of high touch solution sales type thing. But also, it's what's interesting, particularly now with the move to digital, indeed the pandemic, and this is true of events businesses, they suddenly realize they can tap into a global audience. So, whereas typically sales, you go, right, here's your target list of accounts in this county or this town or this country, and off you go. Well, all of a sudden, if you're in the entire world, in whatever niche is your potential customer base, it's very hard to sell to that. And also, what's been happening, we see in B2B decision making, that is happening almost entirely online now. So customers, the first thing you know about it is they've already decided whether they're buying it or not, or almost kind of that. So, and again, that's a very big change from sales in the old world, where you had a brochure at a trade show and you had a couple of meetings or whatever, and phone calls and things. Now customers are doing all of that work kind of in the background, which means that then at that low mid level, it's much more about, sort of product, maybe trials, it's self-service, it's the customer success and onboarding, it's referrals and recommendations and things, which is why, again, I think that's kind of the heartland of a lot of SaaS kind of businesses who do that really well.
Do you see as this evolution occurs, and you talk about also, you can think about that from the point of view of, multi-product companies, and I guess since you started to see people use your platform in some very effective ways, Ashley, is the community, should we be thinking globally, or, some of us still, have small revenue streams from, say, book publishing. Is each book a community? What are you seeing about, the best strategies for implementing, building this back into your model? Is it a micro strategy, or is it better to go large around a brand?
Well, there's lots of answers to that. It's quite a big question, but I suppose in the past, a lot of these communities, particularly tech vendors, but even other sort of B2B media businesses, they were sort of, it was commenting on a blog, sort of a little bit community or some sort of engagement, or in the case of tech companies, they were customer support forums, really. I'm not sure I'd call that a proper community, but they might have tens of thousands of people feeding in answers and stuff, and that's great and usually the business case there was reducing, cost to service customers. But I think that's quite different from the kind of communities certainly we see on Guild, or the ones that I'm thinking of, and maybe Victoria's talking about, where it's not just a customer service thing. It is, a marketing or part of the value proposition to, say, members or subscribers or delegates or learners, to add value to what you're giving them, because they can tap into this, impartial and honest and, peer group, as well as get access to the host kind of media brand or whoever's hosting that organization. But I think the key thing with any of the communities is having some kind of reason for it to exist, some why or some passion at the core of it. So, and that transcends, well, that might dictate whether it's global or not. So in your question about, should it be global or local? Well, it could be either, so if the reason that people are passionate is because it's their local neighborhood or village community or whatever, then clearly the reason that people are bound together is geographic. Yeah. A lot of cases in professional services or sort of B2B, if you take marketing or subscriptions, like we're talking about, it's pretty global really, because the kind of challenges are not specific to a particular country really. So actually the exciting thing, particularly obviously about digital platforms, is connecting people globally. And then you can tap into these global niches in a way that, didn't used to exist so much sort of in the past. So, and in terms of community size, again, that's an interesting one, but we have a whole kind of model for this. But the short answer is, around this Dunbar number thing, or the various concentric circles of the Dunbar number, which are sort of 5, 15, 150, 500, we see these communities often working well in the kind of low hundred, or somewhere between 100 and 1,000 maybe. So several hundred, so which is not dissimilar, I think, to the size of the renewed community, where you get enough natural momentum to sustain it without it getting overwhelming. And I think sometimes the problem in the past, certainly with social media or some communities, they get a bit big and amorphous and impersonal and or chaotic or overwhelming. And so then you have the question, well, do we kind of keep breaking this down, or do we keep refining it in some way, or do we cap the number of members? These are things you need to think about. But certainly I'd say, broadly speaking, it's a mistake to just try and make the community as big as possible. And people have in the past chased followers and subscribers and likes and stuff, and just ended up with a lot of noise, really.
I think the common element I'm seeing on your platform and other communities is exactly that. And it does remind me that, some of the early efforts at blogs and those sort of things created an anonymity, which is the exact opposite of what you're talking about, Victoria, and what you're talking about, Ashley. These are, we've been using words like passionate, engaged, emotional, right brain, left brain. You think about those early blogs where people were regularly flaming one another, because they didn't expect that they were going to see each other next week. They were strangers, but this is part of the continuity-based, monetization strategy where the members of communities are expecting to see each other again very soon. So if they misbehave, they're going to be ostracized. Which is directly. I hope most of you noticed that Robin has already quoted Groucho Marx. So he's already provided his own example of being excluded from communities. It's an ongoing problem. Sorry, Robin. But when you talk about it in those terms, both of you, it's a completely it's a different model than the last generation of, say, tech-based communities or the current social media world, as you said.
Yeah, I think the Groucho Marx comment is, we wanted to create this idea of there's really great stuff going on behind the velvet rope, and therefore you need to join because you really need to be in this very exclusive group of people like you. And I think over the years of developing this sense of, quite an exclusive community where, our membership service, the people who actually served our members were also responsible for facilitating the community. So it felt very seamless. The account managers would be making connections for people as well, which is, was very valuable, very, very specific connections. We would facilitate that often, not just let the community do it itself, but say introduction, this person knows about oil and gas safety, here, let's join these people up in a mini group on our community. But I think so. I think it was an extension of what we were doing anyway. But I think the point you're making about the left brain, right brain, I often think that people will, they make a business case to buy your product based on, data or, information that they need to make better decisions in their business. But often the reason they stay and they renew is the right brain stuff, the emotional connection that they make with the community. And we track that in terms of, they got new jobs, they got recognition, they got social capital out of their involvement with the community, they got recognition, it boosted their ego. And in fact, those tangible they're fairly intangible, but actually they're really, really important part of being in a professional community. And I think, people will say, well, how do you actually do that? You don't necessarily do that, but you're facilitating a space where that happens, right? And it's incredibly important. And that's why subscribers come back to you, even if they move jobs. people are coming back to Kademy now who were customers before at Melcrum because they know that they get that great experience, right? So I think it is those things as well that we kind of need to factor into, community and why it's so valuable.
Yeah, no, that beautifully expressed. And it reminds me of the joy a bunch of us got back, say, in the late 90s, when some of our subscribers started calling customer service and saying, hi, I'm a member. I could still remember feeling happy about realizing that we provided enough touch points. I'm going to go back to that, that we were doing our best to create a love fest rather than a subscription relationship, perhaps. A little bit carried away, but that's the kind of language both of you were using.
Yes, I was just following on from Robin's the Groucho thing, but I was reminded when Victoria was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and beyond just physiological and sort of safety type ones, they are belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Desire to become the best in beast, status, beautiful, recognition, strength, freedom. So our most powerful sort of motivators are humans, are exactly these kind of slightly more softer emotional feelings. So it's
Well, I'd say, and then I'll just comment on that and then switch over to Ed. Maybe you can ask your question, but when I listen to you, Ashley, it's sort of music to my ears, because I think the reason most of us got involved in the niche part of the information industry, we could have been mass market consumer people or whatever, was because we also wanted that connection. So I think, the people on this call are prone to want to figure out better and richer ways to do that, because the opposite part is sort of dial for dollars and, close the sale and, go out and get a glass of whiskey and, joke about how you overpriced whatever it was you just sold. That is not the renewed community. That's not who we are. So you've got a group of people on this call, I think, who agree with absolutely everything you're saying, and hopefully are energized by it. So Ed, you've asked about opportunities. I'll pass it over to you.
Sure, and just on that note, one of the delightful things about getting Renewed started was we could totally 100% focus on community. We didn't have any concerns about commercialization, and we figured if we kept cost out of it, so it made it totally focused just on the most fun parts of this whole thing. And as you say, David, community isn't just about bringing a bunch of other people together. It's about getting a group together that I'm part of. Grouch
and that Robin isn't.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
If Groucho had built his own community, it would have been okay.
Yeah.
So no, I was wondering, because I certainly see more and more people. I mean, we've got certainly Substack is out there. Facebook has announced plans for subscription newsletters. A lot of people have, and between that and the community platforms that are out there, there's sort of a new potential era of subject matter experts, not unlike what prompted our industry, the newsletter industry 40, 50 years ago. It's relatively simple for people to now go directly again. What do we think of that as a threat, as an opportunity, some combination of the above?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I definitely think it would be arrogant or naive or whatever not to at least consider it as a threat, and also as an opportunity, but a threat in the sense that, as happened with digital, if you don't keep up with the times or understand what's going on and what the drivers are behind it, then you will risk getting left behind. And and a very good example of that is this renewed community, of course, because I think this grew out of the SIPA or SIA kind of thing, and we whatever the exact reasons behind it, the point being is that this community has self-organized because it can, and arguably can do a better, or is doing a better job than what in that case was a professional membership organization, but that could be a B2B media organization, it could be an events business or whatever. So we should absolutely consider the possibility our own customers might self-organize because they can, because it's cheaper, or they'll do a better job than we do. So it does put pressure on, or we might consider that our best staff, our best editorial people or whatever might decide to go direct, and therefore, you know, we've got to try and keep that talent and keep them interested. So I definitely think we should see it as a threat, but I mean, also as an opportunity in terms of, you know, these tools and platforms allow us to create new revenue streams, new niches. I think the reality still at the moment is that there's very few individuals who can run any kind of meaningful business. It's still quite, so in reality, I think we are more flexible and allow our staff to have their little side hustle, do experiment on the side, and maybe, you know, just be a bit more flexible about how we work with these competitors / partners. And I think that's another trend in business generally, actually, is this slightly more ecosystem or partnering kind of model. But so yes, I think both a threat and an opportunity.
But I think
sorry, Victoria, you want to go?
Go ahead. You go ahead.
I was just going to say, actually, it kind of, to me, as someone who's tried twice to set up communities as part of a subscription offering and failed for mainly because we just didn't have the horsepower to moderate it and so forth. But to me, it goes back to something you said at the very beginning, and that's trust. And I see a lot of these folks on Substack. There's some great content out there. I'm not sure who the hell they are. You know, we already have subscriber bases and databases of people who know us and trust us. And I think it's incumbent upon us to sort of leverage that and also give them true value in the community sense, as opposed to just putting something out there. Because I have seen lately, whoops, sorry, that's my dog. I'll talk fast. I have seen people try to do this recently, and it becomes, quite frankly, pardon the word, a shit show of trying to massage things through. And sorry that was posted, or sorry, you know, we're going to take this community discussion down. So put up because my dog's about to go crazy. Sorry about that.
Victoria, you've done several models, as Bruce has, unfortunately successfully so far.
Yeah, I think it is about that kind of integration with what you're doing. So, I mean, I would say, yeah, I mean, there are threats, but actually, you know, you have to invest some time and effort and people power into making them successful, you know. But I would also say in the same breath that it's very difficult to quantify the value of a community, that you can't disaggregate it from the rest of your offering. In my world, anyway, you know, it'd be very difficult to say this is the value of the community. But you know, we had a discussion a few weeks ago about, you know, community managers are, you know, they have to be skilled and they have to know your audience very well, and they're pretty essential to establishing communities. And you know, they may be an extension of your other service offerings, but, you know, I don't think you should assume that they just happen, you know, it's like Renewed. I mean, we have real people who are talented doing this, making this community happen.
Here.
It's the same thing. So,
yeah.
So I think it's this idea that you can just let it go. I think it does need, you know, and it has to make sense to you as a you know, commercial proposition as well. It has to, you know, you have to, that's why I think it's very important to understand what community means to your audience and what the right kind of community means.
Yeah, I think, but you have to do that in a way that even if the executives or the C-suite can't moderate because they have C-suite duties, right? If you look at HR efforts to recruit online community managers, and I've been doing this a lot for a couple of clients, I see time and again they're choosing underskilled people to lead those communities, to the extent that C-suite people can weigh in from time to time as needed as possible, and not making it their full-time responsibility. You give it the level of seriousness that your prospects or clients expect. If it's going to be high touch and you don't provide that, I don't see how it can really truly be high touch.
No,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Ashley, what have you seen about you? Because Guild's got 300, 400 communities live now.
Yes, probably more than that. To be honest, we can't see them all, so we don't necessarily know in terms of the number of groups.
Yeah, what do you? To Matthew's point, what do you see?
Yeah,
it's the ones you can.
Well, I think his point about something I'd say quite often in these particularly digital communities, that often if you said to someone sort of senior in a business, well, you know, do you care about your customers and prospects, particularly the big one? Then of course they would say yes. And if they're running an event, for example, they're probably going to not let a junior sales exec stand up at the front and host the event or chair the panel, because they'll want to do it themselves or have someone credible there. And yet, when it comes to the digital community, they think it's okay to have a sort of fairly junior community manager who's really more an admin person doing it. And it's sort of like, and I don't know whether this is slightly a generational thing. Again, I mean, when I look at my my father or father-in-law, I mean, they're sort of more in their 70s now, but it still is the case that digital sort of isn't real, really. I mean, it's sort of, there still is that thing that, whereas if you actually meet someone face to face, that is more real. Now, I massively believe in the power of kind of, you know, face to face in events, but it is strange that, say, often senior people don't take community seriously. Even sometimes when you point out, you do realize your 5 biggest customers are in this and you're totally ignoring them. You'd never do that at an event or in a meeting, would you? And yet it's so, I don't know whether that's a generational or cultural thing, but I do see it happen quite a bit.
I do think, Matthew, there's, you know, it's at the smaller end of the 150 to 1,000, but there's, you know, maybe when people are hiring this, you try to think of, is this a person people who are going to want to spend time with and respect, you know, and like, you know, so just the psychodynamics of the person you're hiring.
Oh, that's an interesting
far
point.
cry from content experts we used to have, where we used to joke like that's the part of the company where all our psychological disabilities are over there. So now those are the people we're putting in front of our communities, you know, like.
Well, this can be a problem, right? When you put somebody who's really adept at data and discussing reporting, but they cannot communicate it. It can, I mean, they can communicate it, but it's either boring or it's almost detached. It's extremely important that I think that you be able to, especially if you're trying to monetize this with sponsorship, it strikes me as something that you've got to be able to like make your sponsor go, you know, that was enigmatic, that was dynamic. If you can't make it so, I think, how does sponsorship work in that environment? What are you doing? You're basically undermining it by having what you described as, I believe, a junior admin stepping in to lead a possibly five-digit sponsorship. You know. Yeah,
you're not going to pay much for that. Maybe we could go to Anna, your question about how do you discover the community, and then return and close out with kind of the monetization question, which several people have asked about. But Anna, do you want to just chime in with your question, or?
Yes, sure. Thank you. I'll be happy to. This is very interesting. And my question is, how do you discover what community means for your audience? I understand the difference between local and global, but how do you start? Do you do interviews? Do you just do trial and error and see how it goes? Do you create a small core of people from your most loyal audience members and go from there? How do you do it?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the way we did it, which was, you know, slowly over time, no hurry, let's establish this. But we did start with a small group of customers who were very engaged, and we, you know, we used those as a sort of sounding board for new product ideas. Really, it was a little think tank at the start, and then we understood that I think what we understood was they just want to connect with people like them in the same size of companies. So, you know, I want to meet people like me in my sector, also outside my sector, but the same challenges. The people who share my challenges was very much who people wanted in the community. So I think, you know, but it was a conversation that happened over time. And as we really understood what would work and what would work globally as well, because we were in a sort of group where the challenges were very global in themselves. You know, they worked for global companies. They wanted to meet people, you know, in different regions to understand, you know, how they dealt with the same issues. So, you know, it was an iterative conversation, I would say, with people. But I think that's part of running a community is just getting under the skin of what they want, really.
What I do hear you say, Victoria, which is kind of an interesting answer to Anna's question, the answer is sort of who almost more than what. It's like you're saying, who shares my common interests?
Yeah.
So maybe that's kind of that's an interesting nuance on it. Ashley, anything on that, and then we'll go back to the monetization.
Yeah, so I did. I published an article recently where I was trying to think through what are the kind of underlying conditions or characteristics which make for a strong or engaged community, and I wrote down 6 words, and the beginning letters happened to spell the word potato, which was quite an interesting mnemonic.
Yeah.
But that was, the passion was one. So this is, something that everyone really cares about, and that might be sustainability, or it might be their profession, or whatever it is. Opportunity. So sometimes it's like, well, there's kind of gold to be made here. Let's all get together, and if we do this together, there's a more exciting opportunity. Threat was the T. So most communities are strongest when they're being threatened. And so like we have a community on Guild for event organizers, and when they were hit last year and had to go pure digital, that was like a massive threat. But it's a massive galvanizing force for a community if you're under threat. Access, which is sort of about access to people if status or power or privilege and things like that. Therapy is a big one, which is another one of the T's. So you'd be surprised how much a lot of this community is just about, oh my God, you feel that too? Or it's like finding your tribe and going, oh, right, gosh, I'm not the only nutter, or my boss says the same thing. And then origin was the O, which is sort of things like alumni, where you come from, your background, your history and things. So I think there's, it's about kind of listening to the customer and thinking, what is that pain point, or what is that opportunity, or what is that need to get together and get things off your chest, or, so that, those are the kind of anchor points, I think, for starting a community based on some point, thing like that. The way in which you can do it, I mean, you can do it quite lo-fi to start with. So as in, that could even be an email list. It could be an event, obviously, like a round table or a get together or digital. So there's all sorts of ways you can just sort of gently and relatively risk-free and cost-free, just get 10 people together. And if you find they're like, oh my God, this was amazing, and can we do this again? And, then there's a natural energy there that kind of says, okay, this could be something,
Yeah, that's a great answer. So we're to close out the 45-minute session, which there are many questions here, and I would challenge all of you to continue the discussions around these points. If we don't get to them here, Joyce, your question about when you've got competitors around the table, what do you do, and how does it change? A great one that maybe we won't quite get to handle today, but put that on our channel, and let's continue to debate it there. So maybe we just close out with the monetization trends, because there's been 4 or 5 chat questions about that, and obviously there's power in you have a more intimate relationship with your most important customers, so that's always going to be a monetization strategy. But beyond that, does it change product development? Are you changing how you're looking at the rest of the business, so you can integrate with these intimate communities you're both describing? How do you monetize? Yeah, Ashley.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually there are loads more ways than people realize. Some are more direct and some. So obviously the simplest thing is you actually just charge people to belong to the community, and the community is the offering and the benefit. And, as Substack was mentioned earlier, that's based on content really. But I think we're going to see, and to some degree, membership organizations are based on not just content and events, but belonging to a community. So you can charge for it direct. Mostly it's a value add to an existing membership or subscription or something. So it adds, say it's part of the offering, but not the entire offering. Sponsorship was mentioned. I mean, we're seeing that happening quite a bit, where sponsors are brought in sometimes to, as a co-branding type thing, or sometimes they're allowed to be part of a community in order to listen into the target market, but not sell too much. Sometimes that can compromise the feeling of a community. And so you have to tread carefully, but it can work. Often I think that it's, often in businesses, if you're selling other things like training or consulting services, when the community often is about conversations, and so it highlights pain points and opportunities. So just someone says, I'm looking for an X, and if you're running the community, you go, we do that. You're amazed. It happened a lot in eConsultancy there, where people didn't even realize we did training, for example, and then they go, oh, we're looking for someone to do our digital training. We go, oh, we can do that. So clients volunteer, or customers, their own pain points or needs, and you can then monetize that. They're just surfacing. Or even, to be honest, for your own, as you're evolving your product and proposition, you just get to hear not just what are the pain points and the trends in the market, so you can respond to those, but even the language they use, for example. So, and then you can tweak your own marketing and positioning to the wider, prospect pool, and know that you really nailed the issues that people have and are talking about. So, even that, I think, is a business case for community.
Yeah, I think I've also noticed, just Ashley, to add to what you said, is that, and it's happening on the Renewed channel, you'll notice all of us are experts in different things. Somebody will post something that you don't understand, and it's also true for your customer base. They may be identifying what your next product is, or what you are next, or you may have just identified your content expert. That may be your next webinar, or it may be your next conference topic, or it may be your next research report or data set. So you're reading it carefully for what the hot button items are is a very, very important point. Victoria, any thoughts on this?
I mean, I think it's like listening to people talk about your products. It's such a rich source of information, and as I said, I like those kind of weak signals that you get from community that often lead to quite big ideas for how you move forward. And I don't have an advertising model, but I like it because it is just a direct conversation with your customers. There's nothing else; it's just you and them, and that's what's so rich about it.
Yeah.
You also don't want to discount the value of the event piece that Ashley was talking about. A lot of us are going to be going back to events, even in person, possibly. And as that appears, these communities provide a way to get buy-in from, like, if you're 1 to 1,000 people, I mean, 10 to 1,000, 100 to 1,000 people, I would argue that's a significant population of really warm connections you've got as sales prospects. So much warmer than somebody who came in April and you haven't seen for 9 months, and now you're trying to get them to sign up again. I think that they're participants they feel much more as participants in your event, the upcoming event, and they feel much more, even if they're only engaging on a weekly or monthly basis, but they feel more committed to that event and more likely, way more likely, I would think, to share in social and in communications with their colleagues.
Yeah, to advocate for the event.
To advocate.
And it may be your content, your event committee.
Mm-hmm.
The most active people.
Oh, that's a good
maybe
point.
That's your leadership committee, or they certainly know what's going on, and if they're involved in the leadership, they'll sell it for you. So, there's so many other questions here that have come up. So again, I'll go back to continue the discussion currently on Slack, but by the time we get together next month, it'll be on Ashley's platform, Guild, which I should say, I think most of you know, Slack is kind of designed for collaboration. Guild is designed for communities, so that the power of that movement will improve Renewed. So again, Ashley, thank you for your generosity, for giving us a home during our developmental phase. It means a lot. I guess I got the dates on our conference wrong. It's the 14th to the 16th of September. I'm on the committee. I should know better. So, with that, I really, Ashley, thank you so much for your wisdom. Victoria, thank you. It's nice to have a information industry session where the keywords are connectedness, attachment, emotions, passion. Those are all good things, so maybe we can wrap up on that note with thanks and good luck to all of you.